This is a CBS News Special Report. I'm Gayle King with Anthony Mason and Tony Dokoupil here in New York. As you see, we're at the White House where President Trump is about to speak publicly for the first time since Iran's missile attack on U.S. troops in Iraq last night.
Iraq's military says no one was hurt after Iran fired more than a dozen missiles at two bases where hundreds of U.S. troops in Iraq are stationed.
Iran says the attack was retaliation for the U.S. killing of its most influential general, that's Qassem Soleimani. President Trump is about to speak. He tweeted last night, although this will be the first time we see him since this Iranian strike on two military bases in Iraq that host U.S. military contractors. He did tweet last night saying all is well, and he'll be making a statement tomorrow. That is now today. We are awaiting that statement. Let's go to Paula Reid, who is at the White House, where the president is about to begin speaking. Paula, good morning.
Good morning. This is one of the greatest tests of President Trump's presidency. The eyes of the world are on him as last night's strikes brought Washington and Tehran perilously close to war. So we're watching now to see what the president does. Will he use this, as he threatened to yesterday, as a means to escalate this situation? Or does he see an opening? Does he see the fact that there were apparently no U.S. casualties as a sign that Iran may be willing to come to the table, may be willing to work together to de-escalate this situation? The president has made it clear he does not want a war with Iran. What he wants is a change in behavior from the regime. He argues that the strike that killed Soleimani, that was done to prevent a war. But Tony, that is based on a bet that despite Iran's strident rhetoric, that they do not actually want to engage in a traditional military conflict with the U.S. Right now, we're waiting to see how the president wants to play this, if he wants to escalate this situation as he threatened to yesterday before these strikes, or if he sees an opportunity to perhaps cool things down a bit.
All right, Paula Reid at the White House. Thanks, Paula. David Martin is at the Pentagon. Oh, here comes the president now. So let's go.
You see Mike Pompeo, it looks like, Vice President Pence. Mark Milley, he's the Joint Chiefs of Staff General. He's there. Other advisors. Still awaiting the president.
Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, standing there.
Still awaiting the president, and this will be the first time we see President Trump publicly since last night's attack on two military bases in Iraq, both of which host U.S. troops and allies.
It's interesting that he has not been on Twitter all morning. The only thing we saw last night where he basically said, so far, so good, all is well. It's interesting. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall this morning while they were having the conversation last night and this morning about what the U.S. response was going to be. Is this a one-and-done situation? Are we now going to de-escalate, or will the U.S. take action in response to the attack last night?
Iran's foreign minister has been on Twitter, and he said of last night's attack, Iran took and concluded, key word there, proportionate measures in self-defense.
But the Supreme Leader has said that this is not over, which is, so we're getting essentially conflicting information. Some military analysts have said, well, here comes the president, it appears now. Here comes President Trump.
As he makes his way to the podium there, this is the grand foyer. That's the formal and official entrance hall to the White House. Let's listen in.
As long as I'm president of the United States, Iran will never be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. Good morning. I'm pleased to inform you the American people should be extremely grateful and happy. No Americans were harmed in last night's attack by the Iranian regime. We suffered no casualties. All of our soldiers are safe, and only minimal damage was sustained at our military bases. Our great American forces are prepared for anything. Iran appears to be standing down, which is a good thing for all parties concerned and a very good thing for the world. No American or Iraqi lives were lost because of the precautions taken, the dispersal of forces, and an early warning system that worked very well. I salute the incredible skill and courage of America's men and women in uniform. For far too long, all the way back to 1979 to be exact, nations have tolerated Iran's destructive and destabilizing behavior in the Middle East and beyond. Those days are over. Iran has been the leading sponsor of terrorism, and their pursuit of nuclear weapons threatens the civilized world. We will never let that happen. Last week, we took decisive action to stop a ruthless terrorist from threatening American lives. At my direction, the United States military eliminated the world's top terrorist, Qassem Soleimani. As the head of the Quds Force, Soleimani was personally responsible for some of the absolutely worst atrocities. He trained terrorist armies, including Hezbollah, launching terrorist strikes against civilian targets. He fueled bloody civil wars all across the region. He viciously wounded and murdered thousands of U.S. troops, including the planting of roadside bombs that maim and dismember their victims. Soleimani directed the recent attacks on U.S. personnel in Iraq that badly wounded 4 service members and killed 1 American, and he orchestrated the violent assault on the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. In recent days, he was planning new attacks on American targets, but we stopped him. Soleimani's hands were drenched in both American and Iranian blood. He should have been terminated long ago. By removing Soleimani, we have sent a powerful message to terrorists. If you value your own life, you will not threaten the lives of our people. As we continue to evaluate options in response to Iranian aggression, the United States will immediately impose additional punishing economic sanctions on the Iranian regime. These powerful sanctions will remain until Iran changes its behavior. In recent months alone, Iran has seized ships in international waters, fired an unprovoked strike on Saudi Arabia, and shot down 2 U.S. drones. Iran's hostilities substantially increased after the foolish Iran nuclear deal was signed in 2013, and they were given $150 billion, not to mention $1.8 billion in cash. Instead of saying thank you to the United States, they chanted death to America. In fact, they chanted death to America the day the agreement was signed. Then Iran went on a terror spree, funded by the money from the deal, and created hell in Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, Afghanistan, and Iraq. The missiles fired last night at us and our allies were paid for with the funds made available by the last administration. The regime also greatly tightened the reins on their own country, even recently killing 1,500 people at the many protests that are taking place all throughout Iran. The very defective JCPOA expires shortly anyway and gives Iran a clear and quick path to nuclear breakout. Iran must abandon its nuclear ambitions and end its support for terrorism. The time has come for the United Kingdom, Germany, France, Russia, and China to recognize this reality. They must now break away from the remnants of the Iran deal, or JCPOA. And we must all work together toward making a deal with Iran that makes the world a safer and more peaceful place. We must also make a deal that allows Iran to thrive and prosper and take advantage of its enormous untapped potential. Iran can be a great country. Peace and stability cannot prevail in the Middle East as long as Iran continues to foment violence, unrest, hatred, and war. The civilized world must send a clear and unified message to the Iranian regime. Your campaign of terror, murder, mayhem will not be tolerated any longer. It will not be allowed to go forward Today, I am going to ask NATO to become much more involved in the Middle East process. Over the last 3 years, under my leadership, our economy is stronger than ever before, and America has achieved energy independence. These historic accomplishments change our strategic priorities. These are accomplishments that nobody thought were possible. And options in the Middle East became available. We are now the #1 producer of oil and natural gas anywhere in the world. We are independent, and we do not need Middle East oil. The American military has been completely rebuilt under my administration at a cost of $2.5 trillion. U.S. armed forces are stronger than ever before. Our missiles are big, powerful, accurate, lethal, and fast. Under construction are many hypersonic missiles. The fact that we have this great military and equipment, however, does not mean we have to use it. We do not want to use it. American strength, both military and economic, is the best deterrent. 3 months ago, after destroying 100% of ISIS and its territorial caliphate, we killed the savage leader of ISIS, al-Baghdadi, who was responsible for so much death, including the mass beheadings of Christians, Muslims, and all who stood in his way. He was a monster. Al-Baghdadi was trying again to rebuild the ISIS caliphate and failed. Tens of thousands of ISIS fighters have been killed or captured during my administration. ISIS is a natural enemy of Iran. The destruction of ISIS is good for Iran, and we should work together on this and other shared priorities. Finally, to the people and leaders of Iran, we want you to have a future, and a great future, one that you deserve, one of prosperity at home and harmony with the nations of the world. The United States is ready to embrace peace with all who seek it. I want to thank you, and God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Just heard the President of the United States giving his first remarks following the attacks on American resources last night. And he said this, that at his direction, a ruthless terrorist, a top terrorist, was eliminated. But Americans, he said this morning, should wake up feeling grateful and happy because we sustained minimal damage and there were no casualties in the attack last night. We've been reporting all morning about the 12 missiles.
The most encouraging thing here is the president said Iran appears to be standing down, which is a good thing for the world.
He tied all of it back to the Iran nuclear agreement, which had been struck by the prior administration, and seemed to say he wants to renegotiate that, bringing in Europe and China.
Right. David Martin is at the Pentagon. David, what do you make of the president's response here?
Well, it's a very tempered response, particularly compared to the tweets that he was sending out before this attack, when he was warning Iran that if it tried anything, it would pay a very big price. Well, Iran did try something, and he's given no indication that the U.S. military intends to retaliate. He did go through the entire litany of complaints that the U.S. has against Iran and its behavior in the Middle East, but he did not talk in terms of retaliating against Iran for this strike. And as you pointed out, he said Americans should be grateful and happy that no Americans were harmed and that there was only minimal damage to the base. And we have some early now commercial satellite photos which show the craters caused by these missiles that were fired by Iran, and the worst damage they seem to show is an aircraft shelter destroyed. So that, in the scheme of things, with lives at stake, that is very minimal damage. One other interesting note, not in the speech, but Senator Inhofe, the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, talked to President Trump last night at about 9 p.m., and he told reporters this morning that the president was very positive and said this opens the way for negotiations.
Well, that remains to be seen. A lot of people are hoping that negotiations will begin and that it's true, that it will be true, as the president said, that Iran appears to be standing down. We thank you very much, David. Elizabeth Palmer is in Tehran, where officials say that last night's missile strike was self-defense. Elizabeth, what are they saying in response to the president's remarks?
Well, they will have listened very carefully and been relieved to hear that there won't be another attack, because there was a risk of escalation, and they were very clear. In fact, the foreign minister tweeted, "We seek neither escalation nor war." But it does look as if this is not really over, in the sense that America and President Trump is saying we don't want Iran's malign influence, as he calls it, in the Middle East, and particularly in Iraq. And that is exactly what Iran wants. It wants to have a huge influence in Iraq. It wants to spread its influence right across the Middle East to the Mediterranean. And a key part of that is its insistence that U.S. troops leave Iraq. That has become, I think, the main goal of the Iranians. Now we're hearing it from everybody, from the supreme leader down. American troops must leave the region. And if they don't, let's not forget that Iran has powerful proxies west of here in Iraq and Syria and in Lebanon. Hezbollah, battle-hardened, well-equipped militias. And if Iran doesn't get its way and see American troops move out, then it's very likely we'll see a nasty and very violent asymmetrical fight spring up in those countries to the west of here.
Liz, the president at one point steered the address, it would appear, directly to the Iranian people, saying that they deserve prosperity and he would like to help them on the road to prosperity. How is the president's speech likely to be heard, not by the leadership of Iran, but by people in the street? I mean, will they hear it at all?
They will, on social media for sure, and they will hope that something can be done, because I tell you, I've come here a lot, and in the last couple of years, the poverty and the despair has just grown.
All right, Liz, thank you very much. Our coverage will continue on our 24-hour streaming network, CBSN. You can watch it at cbsnews.com or on our CBS News app.
There will be more to come on your local news on this station, and tonight on the CBS Evening News, of course, with Norah O'Donnell.
This has been a CBS News Special Report. I'm Gayle King with Tony Dokoupil and Anthony Mason right here at CBS News in New York.
For news 24 hours a day, go to cbsnews.com.